It's time for some hostile therapy. All right, welcome back to another episode of Hostile Therapy with your host, Big Red, and I'm interviewing someone with so many accolades. I'm not going to be able to get them all out at one time. She helped organize the largest march in U.S. history with over 1.3 million strong, the March for Women's Lives. She's also a top slam poet. She worked for the National Organization for Women. She has freed over 300 years of Black lives from the criminal industrial complex. Oh, did I tell you she's also a former criminal, business, and bankruptcy attorney. I only got 24 hours, so I'm going to have to go ahead and introduce her because I got so many accolades I could name for her. Madam Nselaa Ward, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
Blessings for being on the show. Thank you for coming on the show.
I told you I was excited about being here. I heard some of the stories that you've told in the past with some of your other guests, and I wanted to make sure that I was here.
Well, thank you for the compliment on that. All right, so let's just jump into it. Let's go with what we're going to talk with first. Let's go to the March for Women's Lives. Let's start with that first.
Okay.
Was that 2004, 2003?
2004, yes.
2004, okay. How did it feel to be with that many people that had the same common goal as you? That you helped set up anyway.
Well, it didn't feel that way in the beginning because, that was some years in the making. It took us a few years to organize that. I started working for the National Organization for Women in 2002, 2003. And the National Organization for Women is the largest women's organization in the world. However, a lot of people know that it's majorly like a white women's organization, not just a white women's organization, but their average age is about 55 years age or older. So, there was a huge divide when I first came in, where women of color did not feel like white women could really understand their plight. And white women didn't feel like women of color were active enough in the feminist movement. So there was a lot of conversations that we had, a lot of hard conversations that we had to have with each other about where the movement was going and helping each other to understand what was happening in each of our communities. My demographic at the time, I was young, so 20 something. Like I ain't going to age, then it tells how old I am. Right. So I was 20 something years old. My demographic was 20 something year old, young Black females. So having the conversation and organizing was a challenge in the beginning. Everybody felt like, it wasn't going to happen, that we couldn't put together a march where people actually cared about women's lives, where people were going to stand up for the plights that women were going through. And people thought that there was no way that we were going to get women across demographics to unite together because there's this stereotype that women can't get along, and that when we get into a group that we're always going to get into an argument or we're not going to support each other. So we had to get over a lot of challenges. So when we were on that stage, when we finally made it happen after organizing and having to have these hard conversations, going into small communities, one after the other every day, for 2 years, having conversations about why we have to unite together for this particular purpose, and why, yes, we do have things that, white women are not going to understand, and white women, yes, there are going to be some things that you're not going to understand about what's going on in the Black community, but we need to work together on these particular issues. We need you to stand up to protect white women, to protect Black women, and we need Black women to stand up in this march and be counted to show that Black women can make a difference. So, in the beginning, it was like holding our breath, like, are they going to show up? Are people going to come? Like what's going to happen? We're going to see when they come, So when just standing on that stage and seeing this sea of people, in Washington, D.C. that just really never ended. If you look at the pictures from the 2004 march, you see this sea of people that never ended. And I was on the stage doing that, with a lot of amazing people, with Whoopi Goldberg, with, William and Mary, with, Hillary Clinton at the time. I mean, there were so many people that were on that stage that had made a difference. It felt like the first step to where we needed to go in this country.
Nice. Now, it may be a fair criticism because, back in the suffrage movement, the early 1900s, where Black women came together and helped for totality of women's rights. And it seems like, once they kind of got their rights, mostly white women, it seems like Black women kind of left by the wayside.
Right.
Do you see a major difference in between that time and now as far as?
Well, I think that there is definitely a divide when it comes to us getting our right. We had this conversation similarly when RBG died. A lot of Black people were asking, it was like, well, why should Black people be excited about, or feel sad about the fact that RBG died? What did RBG do for Black people? Everything that, that was on paper that she did for people were for white women generally. And then Black women just happened to have some benefit in that. So I think that there are still some divides and some conversations that we need to have in order to get white women to make sure that they are standing up to protect Black women, even if Black women are the only people that are being protected, right? So yeah, there's still many issues where Black women get the bottom of the stick, and I think that we have to work from the bottom up. If we start protecting Black women, who right now gets less than white women, less than Black men, less than white men, when it comes to the pay scale, if we start protecting Black women, then it will dismantle the system of oppression and help everybody to actually to be able to come up in the chain of life. So yes, I say that I do see some of the characteristics that was during the suffrage movement, and we still have a lot of work to go, but we are getting there. We are getting there.
What makes me, and you know more than I do because you're deeper into that organization, but what makes me fearful, you talked about in one of your speeches about the Me Too movement, and you talked about Tarana Burke. And a lot of people, including myself in the beginning, when the Me Too movement got rolling big time, you heard about Rose McGowan and Alyssa Milano. And for a long time, I thought they were the one that started it. Alyssa Milano sent out a tweet. Rose McGowan seemed to become the face of it for a while. And I thought for the longest that they had started, and then long became an article that just hit me all of a sudden. A Black woman had started the Me Too movement because of what she went through in the workplace. For all things I understood is it just happened in Hollywood. That's where it started, and that's where it moved on. And it seems to me, anyway, it feels like she's a forgotten victim in this. And that's kind of my fears, that was, for women or Black women's rights is going to be left by the wayside if someone else takes a hold of it and takes the reins and move it on to somewhere else. And that's what I'm fearing sometimes is going to happen. And that's why I was asking you about, the criticism that may have came with the March for Women's Lives. Let's say, what do you feel about that? As far as Tarana Burke is concerned, do you think she's been left in the dark kind of? I mean, she's in the news, but I don't hear about it like that.
Well, Tarana Burke, she's very vocal. She does a tour around the country talking about how she created the Me Too movement and why it's important for us to make sure that this is a part of any women's platform that we have a discussion about. But I do think that what tends to happen, what we have seen historically in the women's movement or the feminist movement, is that a lot of times white women have a tendency to feel like they have to be our superheroes. That the only way that they can come in and help us is if they are the superhero in the scenario, which means that a lot of times they come and they will monopolize a movement that we already created. One of the things that we're doing right now is that we have a national tour that we're doing. Actually, it's international now because we're taking it to France, Nigeria, and the Netherlands. But it's called White Women Can We Talk? Right.
I saw that.
Yes, and the conversation that that we have in that is having a conversation with white women that typically feel like they're on the liberal side and they support Black women, they support, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement. They feel like, hey, you know, we're not the bad ones, we're not the racist ones, we're not the oppressors, but they still have some practices that tend to oppress Black people and Black women in the movement. So we go in and we educate them about how they can become better allies. And one of the conversations that we have is how we do not need you to come in and rescue us. We need to empower ourselves. You cannot come in and monopolize our movement. So that's a conversation that has to be had regularly when anybody is trying to become and be an ally in the Black women's movement, the Protect Black Women's movement, or the People of Color movement. So in regard to Tawana Burke, yes, there were a lot of people that tried to take over the movement that she originally started. I think ultimately the whole point of it was to bring awareness. So I'm glad that, you know, Milano and Rose, they came in and, you know, they made sure that people knew what this was about. But it's important for white women to understand that when you're being an ally in our movement, that you have to give credit and step aside when it comes to defining what that movement is supposed to be about and bringing awareness to the issue. So I definitely think that was a big problem and that we have to have conversations to stop that.
Yeah. Well, you know, they don't even get along now. And it seems like Alyssa Milano and Rose McGowan, it seems like people are more interested in them arguing than work has to say. And this is why I hate when Hollywood took a hold of that movement.
Yeah. A lot of times the media in general will try to deflect on the serious issues. I mean, we have the same issues with what's going on with Breonna Taylor. You know, there's all these distractions that happen around us to try to get us off course of what we really need to be working towards. But we have to, you know, keep the end goal in mind and keep the movement in mind anytime we're doing the work. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. I see that regularly.
Okay. Well, tell me this. What can men do to help the women's rights move forward? We hear you, but some men hear you and they may be holding poster boards or whatever saying women's rights, but what can we do to act upon what you need, what women need?
You know, I think that's a really big question. That's a good question. One of the things, I think that this was something that was a big issue when Ice Cube created his the contract with Black America, right? And I feel like all of his intentions were amazing. He really wanted to make sure that that America had a contract that was going to help and uplift Black people. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of times we're surrounded by people that remind us of us, people, you know, that fit into our culture. And in somebody like Ice Cube's world, that might be a lot of men, right? So he didn't have a lot of, when he started drafting this contract, which was really before July, I think he released it on July 1st of this year, but he had started writing it before, he deferred to people that were already in his circle. Right. So he didn't have a lot of women that put input into what this contract with Black America was supposed to look like, because there are issues that are very unique to Black women, particularly, that were not addressed. Issues like, you know, the Violence Against Women's Act, issues like the Equal Rights Amendment, issues like, you know, equal pay with Black women and making sure that we are getting paid for what we're worth. We see that not just in Hollywood, but we see that just on lower levels in corporate America, and even just on basic work levels, that Black women are still not getting paid what Black men or white men make. So I think the first step that we need Black men to do is to make sure that we're at the table, make sure that we are able to have a voice in this conversation. A lot of times in our community right now, people are so homophobic that anytime feminine energy is let into the room, that you know, they feel like somehow it's degrading or lessening the Black man. Like they can't let feminine energy into the room, or they can't let, you know, this, you know, women's energy into the room without making it seem like the Black man is being put into a weaker stance. Yeah. So what we really need Black men to do is, first of all, to be so comfortable in who they are and their masculinity and feminine energy, because they have both sides, right? To be so comfortable with both sides that for women to have a conversation is not necessarily It's not necessarily making them any less of a man. That's the first thing. But then also making sure that we're at the table when conversations are being had that affects the Black community as a whole. We need them to make sure that if you go into a room and you see all men there, that somebody is saying, wait a minute, okay, where are the women at this table? Where are they at, right? Because we don't even know that the conversation is being had a lot of times, and these meetings that are making decisions about what's going to happen to Black America and Black lives. So making sure that we're at the table so that we can make sure that our community as a whole is being healed and is being worked through. So I think that's the first step.
Holding everyone accountable.
Holding everybody accountable.
Right. Let me tell you, and this may be kind of off kilter here. Let me tell you a story about me and my daughter, right? Actually, no, not me and my daughter, but it's kind of related to my daughter. But me as a young man, and this goes to men being afraid to be around things with feminine energy. And it's just so stupid. It's so stupid. And I tell people it's so stupid. When I was younger, I would not want to go in the grocery store with my mom, and she would tell me to go get some feminine hygiene products. And you know what I used to think, and a lot of guys still think about it, for some reason, we thought homophobic thoughts. We like, if I go up there with this pad up here and check this out, they're going to think I'm gay. And I don't know why what that came from. I don't know. I guess it was taught. Maybe it was a cultural thing. Mm-hmm. And then I get older, and it's like I have a daughter. And of course, she goes through that, and I have no problem with that. I don't understand why I had a problem with that when I was younger. I don't know where that negative energy came from. I'm like, I don't know, why would guys even think that in the first place, to go do something for a woman that's just as natural as could be? Why would you think that's a negative thing? I just had to throw that in there to interject. I know it's a weird story, but it expounds on so many other things that guys are afraid of, to either let women help or help women in turn, because they'll think like it's taken away from them being a man.
Exactly. Even with movies, like it's so interesting. I have two sons. I have two young sons, and one of them is very like hyper masculine, and the other one is just a regular 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like I watch all types of cartoons and kids movie, but the other kids at his school, they will have something to say, or they'll pick on him if they watch any type of kids movie that has a female main character in it. Like all of the movies and kids shows that have female main characters, they'll tell them, oh, that's a girl's show, oh, that's this show, and that's that show. So They can't even support female lead roles on television without other children calling them gay or weak or feminine, so not being able to support feminine energy or Black women is something that we're taught very, very, very early on in age. Like by the time we're 3, 4, 5 years old, it's already embedded in our brain that men, especially Black men, cannot associate with anything feminine in their culture. And a lot of it comes from the hyper masculine image that white slave owners gave Black men. Like their only purpose as Black men was to be work mules and to create babies. That was their only purpose, right? So white slave owners constantly portrayed Black men as anything outside of feminine. They couldn't have any feminine energy whatsoever. Otherwise, they would be sold off to another slave owner. They would be afraid that their children were going to come out weak, so they would sell their children to other people because they were like, he was very feminine, or he did this and this and this, so he probably going to have feminine children. So go ahead and get rid of those babies. Sell those over to that other plantation over there. So Black men could not show any type of feminine energy, back then, because it meant that their family would be broken up, that they would be murdered, that they would be killed, that they would be less valued, and it could potentially hurt them in the long run. So, a lot of this has been embedded in us from generation to generation, even today, and we don't even know where it comes from. We just like, I don't know why I can't go to the store and get feminine products. I don't know why I don't watch like chick flicks, what would stereotypically be called chick flicks. All we know is that that's been life. That's how we were raised.
And this goes to something you said in your speech, and you can expound upon this: PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And the other version, most people are going to think of post-traumatic stress disorder, but you said the one. The other one now people are talking about is post-traumatic slave disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Could you expound on that for me?
Absolutely. So what the short end of it is that post-traumatic slave disorder is when people in oppressed communities, they pass down the traits of oppression, what other people have done to them, what white people have done to them in the case of the slave trade. They pass down those oppressive characteristics generation after generation after generation, right? And then the generations that follow don't even realize why they're behaving or reacting in certain ways. We see this a lot of times in our ideas of success, right? When we see it in corporate America and we start to feel like only one Black person, can be in a lead level, only one, woman can be in a CEO or executive level. And if too many other Black people or too many other minorities or too many other people of color or too many other women are present, then we start to feel like they have to be competition. What this does for the oppressor, whoever the oppressor may be at the time, is it forces us to have to work harder, right? Because we're like, wait a minute, I gotta be better than every other Black person here, because if I'm not better than every other Black person here, then they're gonna let this other Black person get the job, because we still are conditioned to believe that only one person can succeed, only one person can be successful, only one person can get the job, only one person can get the money, only one person, can be the one that gets out of poverty or gets out of the life or gets out of this bad situation, right? Which is why we had, slave overseers back in the day, right? It was that one person, that one Black Negro, at the time, what they called, that would watch everybody else. But there could only be one, because he had to make sure that everybody else stayed in line. And he was the one that would go snitch to the master anytime somebody was talking about escaping or running away, right? So we pass these characteristics down from generation to generation in order, in all honesty, just to protect our families. Like, for example, a lot of times Black women, because we have suffered so much through the slave trade, we teach our Black sons to be compliant. We teach them sometimes, and I'm saying not all Black women do this, but you find in some cases Black women teaching their sons to just blend in with the system, do whatever you can to get into the system, because we have been conditioned from many centuries ago to believe that if we step out of the system, that our sons would be killed. We watch our husbands being quartered and pulled apart, by horses, so we watch them, the abuse for generations and generations, right? So this has been embedded in our brains to believe that if we step out of line, that we could die. So we teach our kids generation after generation afterwards to stay in line, because we just don't want them to die. Now the consequences are not the same as it was back then, but we still end up teaching people the same things because it's been passed on for so many generations and passed on in so many communities and families.
Other people would call that a generational curse. And what I compare it to is to the questionnaires you get into a doctor's office when they ask you, do you have a history of heart disease? Do you have a history of diabetes? Now, you may be healthy. Like right now, you may be 20 years old, you'll go to the doctor, heart may be fine, but you have a higher tendency because of what your parents and your great-grandparents had to have heart disease or diabetes or alcoholism. And then when I hear people say, well, other races who came to this country were able to get together and move forward, how come you can't? Well, did they go through the same thing for 400 years? Race? And well, how come they just can't get over it? I'm like, well, it's deeper than just having another kid and then teaching them. It's embedded. So you have to try just as harder to get rid of the generational curse or PTSD as you would somebody who didn't go through the same thing.
That's absolutely right. I mean, we have to try 10 times harder, because it's not really just about what we're putting into our community and what we're putting into our kids, but they go to school and they're experiencing PTSD. Like, for example, I told you that, my sons, like all the kids, they won't even let him watch a feminine lead character in a show without, saying something about his masculine or feminine energy that he has.
Right.
So, you know, it's not just what we're putting into and pouring into our children. They're going to get the same mentality and the same generational curses from the rest of the community, from school, from their friends, from TV, from the media. When they go to work, when they go to jobs, you know, they're always going to be present with that energy. So we have to overcome 10 times more just to teach them not to be able to respond to that, which is hard. That it's really hard to try to teach a young, you know, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, hey, you're going to leave me. You know, you're not going to be with me the majority of the day, because when they go to school, they're going to spend more time with other people than they are with you from the age of 5 on, right? It's hard to teach a 5-year-old to say, you know what, you're going to be with these other people more than you are with me, more than you are me. And they're going to put pressures on you that I'm not going to be able to control when you walk out of this house. But don't believe them, okay? You know, no matter what you tell them, things are still going to affect them. So we're overcoming a lot more than just, you know, saying, you know, I'm going to teach my kids something different, you know, because it's surrounding them anytime they're not with you. And sometimes when they are with you. And because there's things that you might not even know that you're teaching your children that you feel like it's just teaching them to be safe, that's teaching them to stay into this generational curse.
Nice. So, okay, let's move a little forward from that. Now, all the accolades I named of you, the things that you are doing now are excellent, but everyone has a journey before they get to the mountaintop. Your journey, as far as I know, early, is you were at one time at a young age a sex worker and a stripper. Can you tell me what led to you getting into that industry? How did you get introduced to that industry?
Yes, so I was a sex worker between the ages of roughly 12 and 19.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say sex worker, a lot of people were like, what exactly does that mean? You know, like I say sex worker now, but I mean, we call them hoes, prostitutes, streetwalkers. You know, we didn't even say sex worker when I was younger. But we do that now because it's a friendlier word that doesn't criminalize the act.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was, first of all, the first thing is that, you know, I grew up in a community, a very oppressed community that also had generational curses. So everywhere we went, Black women were taught that we were not as valuable as other women, even regardless of whether it was because of, you know, how we looked, you know, how we talked, what our hair looked like, you know, what, you know, vernacular we use. We were taught that somehow we were not as good as the rest of the world, as any other female in the world. You know, we were taught that exotic women were more valuable than us, that white women were more valuable than us, that women that had a certain texture of hair was more valuable than us, that women that were lighter in complexion was more valuable than us, than women who didn't have the natural curves that Black women have were more valuable than us. So I grew up in this community that was always directly and indirectly reminding me that I didn't have value, right? So I always felt like I was trying to regain and figure out how to get my value back in life somehow. And I had to go through a lot of therapy and coaching and counseling to be able to really figure this out, figure out where all of this came from. But on top of that, when I was 11 years old, my mother, she ended up getting shot in a crack cocaine deal that went bad. And she ended up being paralyzed for several years. So during that time, she got really, really depressed, and she got really, really significantly hooked on crack cocaine. And when she was going through her crack cocaine addiction, it really caused her to disconnect from her children and just from, you know, anything that loved her, you know, for the most part. So at 11 years old, I was constantly trying to prove my value to my mom. Like, this is why you should love me. I ended up having to be separated from my mom, and I ended up having to move with my grandparents. And my mom, you know, she just kind of separated. She couldn't take care of me anymore, and, you know, had to go through her struggle, whatever that was at the time. So I was also, in addition to trying to prove to the entire world, you know, that I had value, because they told me regularly, I heard everywhere that I wasn't as valuable and that I wasn't going to get my happily ever after because of the way I looked. And then on top of that, trying to prove to myself that I had some value. And now, you know, at 11, you know, trying to prove to my mom, hey, I have value, please connect to me, please connect to me. So, you know, that opened up a lot of doors for people in my community that saw that I had a strong hustle mentality. And a hustle mentality can be good, but it can be taken advantage of in certain situations. So I was surrounded by a lot of drug dealers, drug addicts, and other prostitutes and sex workers, you know, that only knew how to survive. And I honestly don't think that any of them, well, I'm not gonna say any of them, some of them, but the ones that was the closest to me that, you know, helped to navigate this bridge into the game, I don't think they were trying to hurt me. I think they just saw somebody that had a hustle about her and was like, hey, you know, if you really have a hustle, I can help you. You know, like if you really, you know, want to make money and you really want to get out here, I can help you. You know, so I had a lot of people that was introduced, hey, I can introduce you to this person. I know this person that can do this, and I know this person that can do that. Initially, it was just really me wanting to be loved, you know, at 12 years old. That's really what it started out like. I just wanted to be loved, and I was dating all of these older men who was promising that they was going to love me, but really just wanted to have sex with me at the time, you know. And then, you know, it got to the point where everybody else started to value. I felt like in my head, it was the story that I was telling my 12-year-old self in my head, of course, that, you know, everybody else was saying that these people really didn't love me because they were just sleeping with me and I wasn't getting anything out of it. So they're just using you and you're getting nothing out of it. And this is even more proof that you're not valuable like the rest of the world has said. So then I would get to the point where I would be like, well, you know, you have to do this for me if you really love me. If you want, you know, if I'm sleeping with you, you have to take me shopping. If I'm sleeping with you, you have to buy me this. If I'm sleeping with you, you have to buy me that. And being 12 years old, trying to be in a world where everybody was older and had more knowledge than I was, you know, I would try to negotiate these things and then I would just end up getting played and hustled myself, you know. So I would end up sleeping with people who would promise they was going to buy this and buy that and do this for me, and then after I slept with them they would disappear. So of course, me being 12, 13, 14 years old, I had to up my game and up my hustle. So instead of, you know, requiring it afterwards or even requiring little things before, I had to get to the point where, you know what, let me get my value up front. You know, let me get my value up front because so that they can't hustle me. So instead of saying, you know, buy me this, buy me that, no, you have to give me $500 before I sleep with you, right? Give me $500 and then we can, you know, we can try, you know, to talk about what we're going to do after you give me the $500, you know. And somehow that mentally translated into value for me because now I had something physical that I could feel and touch and use to show myself and the world and my mother indirectly, you know, that I had value and that everybody was wrong. And that even though I was brown with nappy hair, you know, and chubby at the time, even though I wish I was the size that I was when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, you know, but even though I was those things that told the world that I wasn't valuable, I had proof, I had something tangible to say that I was. So that was the initial way that it started.
That sounds like a familiar story for a lot of people in our races. We look for something tangible to give ourselves value, whether it comes from cars or clothes or just money and concerned. And when did you find your value in yourself?
You know, it was a long, it was a lifetime process in all honesty, because keep in mind, I mean, a lot of people felt like I started to find value when I started practicing law. You know, and even that wasn't the case. I knew ever since I was 8 years old that I wanted to be an attorney because I had seen so much happen to my family and friends. I saw my mom dragged out of the house by police officers so many times, and my uncles, you know, abused by police officers, and my dad went to prison, you know, and was dragged out by police officers. So I saw so many people taken and abused by the police that I wanted to be an attorney ever since I was 8 years old. So, you know, having that vision in mind is what really kind of pushed me through these times when I was doing other things while I was on my way to my vision. But eventually what happened is that I started trading that monetary value for a title. where I was like, you know what, I'm an attorney now. See, I told you I was valuable. I told you I was smart. Like, look what I'm doing for the world. I'm doing all of this stuff. See, I'm helping people in their bankruptcies. I'm helping keeping people out of jail. I'm helping my family get through their legal issues. I'm helping this person build their business. Look, I have value now. Look what I'm doing, for the world. Value me. Tell me that I'm important now. So I was just trading one thing, for another.
Yeah.
And because the rest of the world said that, oh yeah, attorneys are valuable, doctors are valuable, people that make a lot of money, they're valuable. In my head, I felt like I was doing what was right for myself. It actually wasn't until I stopped practicing law that I had to really evaluate who I was and what my value was on the inside. Because when I stopped practicing law, when you're practicing, I was practicing for roughly about a decade, but when you're practicing, I moved out of the South. The South is one of the places, first of all, it's one of the most racist places in the world, not even just the country, but it's one of the most racist places in the world. And I didn't even realize that I was living in one of the most racist places in the world. I thought, that it had just become a normality for me. So when I started traveling around the world, I went to, Africa, I went to Kenya, I went to Ghana, I went to Hong Kong, I went to London, Switzerland, Russia. I went to so many places around the world in addition to around the country. When I went to, the Midwest in Colorado and became an attorney, after a while, I started to, like, people treat you different, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, people didn't treat me like, the little brown girl in North Carolina that was a former prostitute, So I started, all of a sudden, I felt like I was living this different. Oh, I'm not that person anymore. I was able to run away from that past and didn't have to worry about the consequences of the things that I had done previously, or even, the titles that people gave me previously. So I honestly do remember times when I actually started to forget about the oppression that people of color was going through, because people didn't treat me that way anymore, because now I had this title that said I was an attorney. And I felt like, oh, this is how they treat all Black people, when it was really just how they treated people that had this title, right? Or people that had a certain type of income, and you forget that they're treating you differently for a reason. So when I stopped practicing and I moved back to Georgia, right? So I didn't, refer to myself as attorney, Nselaa Ward anymore. Mm-hmm. That's when I started to realize that, that I was associating my value with the title and the money that came with being an attorney, because all of a sudden I was just the brown little girl again. Like, I literally started to flash back to when I was a sex worker as a kid at 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, because, now I didn't have this title and people just treated me like everybody else. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that everybody else was still being oppressed 10, 15 years later. So I really had to deep down dig, first of all, to be able to reclaim my value, not for what I was doing for anybody else, but what I was doing for me. I had to go back and heal the things that I felt like I needed from my mom, or I felt like I needed from the world. All those times where I felt like I needed my mom to connect with me and just be a mom and tell me she loved me and tell me that I was great. I had to do that for myself now, right? Because now I was too old. Right now, me going, Mom, can you tell me such and such? She says, girl, get out my face. She's not going to do it, Mm-hmm. All those times that I needed the world to be like, girl, you are beautiful. Girl, look at those hips. Girl, look at that hair. Girl, look at your eyes. You're gorgeous. Everything that I was expecting for the world to tell me, and hoping and praying that maybe if I just change my hair, they'll tell me that I'm great and I'm beautiful. Maybe if I straighten it, maybe if I just lose some weight, maybe if I fix my skin with this Ambi, the world would tell me that I'm valuable again, right? So I didn't start reclaiming my value and really being able to love myself and get back to who I was meant to be in my divine purpose until I stepped away from law. Mm-hmm. And stopped using those as an exchange mechanism.
I feel most people will find their value from what's internal, from what's inside their soul. I think what happens with a lot of celebrities when they get rich and famous, I'm trying to think of a name right quick, but when they do get rich and famous and they happen to go from A-list to D-list or F-list or whatever, and they lose all the fame and accolades and people cheering their names. Now they're back to this just being a regular person. Now they don't have the people talking to them for what they provided externally, what they did as an entertainer, what they did as a sports athlete. Now people don't care because they never got to see what was on the internal part. The people who care about the internal are usually going to be your closest of friends because they know what you provide: love, friendship, therapist, whatever you can provide for them. It's not monetary. It's not how you can entertain people. It's all internal. And if you're not able to appreciate what you do provide internally or who you are besides your skin, what's on the outside, or what you provide, I think a lot of people end up going into depression and sometimes worse, suicide, because they don't understand what their inside or visceral value is. I like that word, visceral value.
That's absolutely right. I mean, when you build up your value on things that are not solid,
Mm-hmm.
you know, as soon as they're taken away, you will crumble, and that results a lot of times in suicide, you know, and depression and criminal activity. Which is why, you know, lawyers have they have the highest suicide rate next to dentists.
Really?
You know, because yep, the highest suicide rate next to dentists.
I've heard dentists. I've heard lawyers. Okay.
Because, you know, we don't, a lot of times what happens, really, you know, what happens is that a lot of times lawyers, you're conditioned to believe that it's about you, like the greatness that the world is giving you, right? The all the admiration and the shine that the world is giving you, you believe that it's really about you and not about your title. It's easy to confuse those two, you know, whether you're a dentist, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever the case may be. But as soon as you step out of that world, you start to realize that the value was not based on you and it was based on something else. And now you don't even know who you are anymore. It was very hard, even for me, coming out of the legal world, to figure out who I was as just Nselaa. Like, oh my God, who am I? Like, if I don't have attorney at the front of my name, if I'm not running the biggest bankruptcy practice in my city, if I'm not making this much money, who am I? Like, what makes me a good person? What makes me valuable? You know, like without all of the titles and all the extra stuff that came with it, the world doesn't teach you. We don't learn that. And in all honesty, our parents, I know in the community I grew up with, our parents didn't teach us that either.
Right. That
we were just valuable by ourselves. Our parents taught us you need to go out there and make that money. You need to go out there and get a job. Don't you be trying to stay home after 18. You get 18, you got to move out the house. You better go to school. You better go to school so you can get a good job afterwards, because you ain't going to be no bum. You better not be no bum up in here. That's what we hear, you know. We don't hear somebody telling us, you know what, regardless of what type of job you do, regardless of what you're doing for anybody else, as long as you're doing good for yourself, you are amazing. You are important. You are valuable. You are special. Fuck what everybody else has to say. We don't hear that. They don't tell us that. You know, they don't. And they think that they're doing what's best for us. They think that they're trying to help us to survive. Right. Just like, you know, the mothers in slavery thought they were helping their children to survive by saying, you know what, you better listen to master. Don't try to run away. You be a good slave, because master will take care of you in the long run if you just stay on this plantation. Don't do nothing too risky. We thought that we were saving our babies. And a lot of times we think we're saving our babies now, but we're really tearing them down. We really are.
You're right. Well, tell me, who are you? If someone was to come in and repossess everything you had, to take everything physical of monetary value from you, and you were stripped naked, what would be left? Who are you? What is your value?
So I'm a human that really cares about the human condition. You know, one of the things that that I had a problem with after my experience both in the sex work industry and my experience as an attorney is that I really had an issue with connection, because in the sex work industry, I had to teach myself to disconnect from people in order to be able to do the work. So I had to start treating everybody like a transaction, you know, like, okay, give me this money, I'll do whatever, no feelings attached, don't touch me, don't kiss me, I don't like you, you disgust me, but fuck it, you got this money, let me get it. You know, like, so I had to learn how to treat everybody like a transaction, not to mention that because my mother was so disconnected, I learned disconnection from her as well. When I started to practice law, I still had the tendency to treat everybody like a transaction. I still was not able to connect with people, because you see people that go into prison for the rest of their lives, you know, people that are getting the death penalty, people that, you know, you will never see again, people that the police are coming after them and they have to go on the run, whatever the case may be. You can't get too connected to them because you have to do a job. So one of the biggest issues that I've been working on is my ability to connect and to be in tune with my emotions. You know, again, because I have really, really detached from them. Everything that we learn in life tells us that emotions are unnecessary. Emotions are a hindrance. Emotions get in the way. Emotions can't solve your problems. You're being too emotional right now. Leave your emotions at the door. You know, they say, you know what? Don't bring emotions into business. Business is business. Don't be adding all this baggage here, right? So we learned that everywhere we went. So I think that I purposely have been working on my connection to people in the human spirit. So when you ask me who I am, I think that I am a woman who cares about human connection and cares about the human experience, and that I want to make sure that everybody that I touch is experiencing love and gratitude, and that I receive that as well from myself and from the world.
You want to make a change in people's life, whoever you touch.
You know, I do want to make a change in their lives, but that's not the main thing that defines me, because like I told you before, previously, you know, I always had to define who I was by what I did for other people. Even being a lawyer was like, you know what, I'm special because I'm getting people out of jail. I'm special because, you know, I'm helping people save their house, or helping people to file for bankruptcy, or helping people start their business. So initially, I defined myself many times by what I was doing for other people. And even outside of law, you know, to some degree, parts of my life was defining myself by what I did for other people. Like, oh, I organized the March for Women's Lives. We changed the world. We changed the government. We did this, we did that. You know, it was defining who I was, my value, by what I did for other people instead of what I did for myself. Right. So now, while I do love, and I still get excitement and joy out of helping other people and changing the world, it doesn't define me. You know, what defines me is how I connect to others, just connecting. Even if I don't change your life, right? If I connect it to you, you know, it allows me to connect to myself more, and it allows me to connect to God more.
Nice. Okay. I like that. I like that statement. Okay. All right. Let's talk about this next thing here. This was in your TED Talk speech. Where you were talking about the lessons you learned from the bar, aka the strip club. You gave 4 examples of the lessons you learned. One being define your own success. Allow vulnerability, build a family model, and lift others while you climb. If you could you expound on? We'll just go through one at a time. Could you expound on, starting with define your own success? What does that mean to you?
Yes. Well, you know, coming from my community, keep in mind that, you know, we were already the bottom of the barrel, right? Everybody already thought that that we weren't anything. You know, we were prostitutes, we was hoes. Like, even before the strip club was actually an upgrade from what we were doing in the streets, because initially, you know, we was just in, you know, going to the park, you know, the local park, trying to get tricks, you know, heading out and walking through the trailer parks, trying to get tricks and trying to get people, you know, to pay us to do different things. So the world already felt like we were at the bottom of the barrel. They felt like we were the worst of the worst. We were the degenerates of society. And one thing that I talked about in the TED Talk is what I really loved about it was that I could only go up from there, right? So I wasn't in the beginning. Now, when I became an attorney, it started creating some other obstacles. But in the beginning, I wasn't limited to everybody else's definition of success. Like, it gave me the ability, starting from the bottom, to create my own idea of success. Like, at some points of that experience, like, success was just making sure that all the girls that came with us that night left with us that night, because people were getting murdered, people were dying, people were getting arrested, you know. So initially, like, there were some points where we were just like, if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if 6 of us come back here tonight at 4 o'clock in the morning, then we won, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we all got money, then that's good too, right? So we were able to define success just simply by the human spirit and making sure that everybody was good. Success wasn't defined by, being the most successful attorney, making, 7 figures, going out and changing everybody else's lives, but not able to change our own. Success was simply defined by the human spirit and just taking care of each other and taking care of ourselves. And that was so important, like that was the initial connection that I started to lose over time, was just being able to connect to each other, to say, we were successful because we're still here. So defining our own success, whatever that was, and that changed in many different circumstances, actually helped us to keep the vision that where we were today wasn't going to be where we were tomorrow. And that's okay. This right here is success today, but knowing that this is not going to be forever, that's success.
Okay. Well, what about, that sounds like that kind of delves into the next one for us, building a family model.
Yes, absolutely. And that was also about the idea of connection, is that, family is not just who you were born with. It's not just that blood relation. Being able to connect to people as a whole was very important, because you had to rely on the people that were in your circle. If you couldn't trust the people that were going out with you, then you might not survive. Nobody was going to tell if somebody was trying to beat your butt, or trying to hurt you in a dark space or dragged you behind the alley. Like, if you couldn't trust those girls, then you didn't have anything. So we had to build a family model. We had to learn to trust each other. We had to have each other's back. When you have the luxury of being in a safe space all the time, you get communities that be like, you know what, I take care of me and mine. If they're not my family, then I don't care about what's going on with the rest of the world. We didn't really have that luxury. So we had to learn how to build loyalty and trust and connection with the people that were in our circle.
Okay. Well, okay, how about this next one? Allowing vulnerability.
Allowing vulnerability was something that I had to actually learn over time, right? Because even when I first started practicing, it was very hard for me to be vulnerable, because I still didn't tell my story about where I came from or what I experienced. When I started practicing law, it was all of a sudden like, okay, wait a minute, I made it to this next stage of life. I can't tell anybody where I was or what I did before, because if I tell everybody where I was or what I did before, then they're not going to let me into this club anymore. And in all honesty, I've been kicked out of every single club or group that I've joined, for one reason or another. So I already had that trigger of abandonment that was going on. So in the beginning, when I first left my previous lifestyle as a sex worker, like I didn't want to be vulnerable with anybody, right? Because I felt like as soon as I was vulnerable, the bottom was going to fall out. So I never told anybody that I was a sex worker. I never told anybody about my criminal history. I never told anybody about any of that stuff. All I wanted them to know was, hey, I am at the top of my class. I go to a top tier law school in the country, the Harvard of the West. And I'm one of the smartest people on the curve. I got hired at one of the top law firms in the country. Like, that's all I wanted to tell people. And a lot of times what happens is that if you're always only showing people, the good parts of you, they're not going to support you. They're not going to be able to connect with you, and they're not going to feel like they can make it out of whatever they're going through as well, right? And then ultimately what's going to happen is that as soon as you show them that you're human, they're going to, like I said before, they're going to try to crucify you like Jesus,
right?
Like, as soon as you show that and everybody is human. But a lot of times in life and society, we're trying to show them only the good parts. How when your family, they tell, oh, my baby doing good. He just got this new job and he just got married and, he got 2 kids and he making all this money. He doing good. But they don't tell your family and your cousins about the struggles you had to get to that mountain, that you had to climb up, right? We have a tendency, we tell people that success is a straight line up a lot of times, right? And it is a straight line up if you're looking at it from a distance, if you're looking at it from far off, right? We think, okay, all I got to do is go to college and then go to law school, then I'm going to get a job, then I'm going to get a better job, then I'm going to get married, then I'm going to get kids, and, you know, I'm just going to have this American dream. So if I can just get to that first part, everything is going to be up from there. So when we actually start to experience it and we're living in the valley, right? We're living in it and we're not seeing it from a distance, because from a distance, it looks like it's straight up. But when you get real close, you start to see these ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs that's constantly moving, right? We don't see that from a distance, right? So the vulnerability is about being able to have conversations about those downs, those valleys while you're going up, so that the people that are coming behind you, they can be prepared as well, so that they can jump over those valleys if they can. Sometimes they might just fall in the valley too, and they'll climb their way up. But if you let them know, if you're transparent about the valleys that you're going through on this journey up, if it's a journey up, you know, then you can help other people to be able to jump over some of the potholes and the ditches and the valleys that you fell through. You know, it wasn't actually until attorney regulation started outing me about, you know, some things in my past that I actually started becoming transparent about my history as a sex worker and some other things. You know, before attorney regulation started outing me, I never told anybody because I only wanted to tell them the good parts. And then all of a sudden, when we started handling very controversial cases, attorney regulation would be like, wait a minute, who is this, you know, Black girl that's coming in here getting all these non-guilties? What's happening? Let's do some research on her. Let's pull her background. Let's figure out what's going on. And then all of a sudden, everything was just out. Everybody just knew. And it felt like my world had just dropped out the bottom. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe they just told the whole world. Like, it was so hurtful to me. It was so hurtful to me. But once I actually started to be able to come out and tell my story, so many different people started coming out and saying, you know, I'm so glad that you told your story, because now I know that, you know, I could do this one day. Now I know that this is not going to be forever. Now I know that this is, you know, a comma in my life and not the period. You know, now I know that there's something on the other side. So I think that we can help more people in the world when we're transparent and we talk about the whole journey and not just the good parts.
I go back to the part where we were talking about value. And I think why some people find it hard to be vulnerable is because vulnerability is worried that someone can take away your value. You tell how certain bad parts of your life, you feel like the people who you view as your peers are going to look down on you, and that's going to drop your value down however many points you think it can. And I think what you've done, once you come to a point where you understand who you are, you can tell anything you want and no one can take that from you. You can tell the bad parts along with the good parts and no one can drop your value. And so you can be 100% vulnerable, transparent as you want to be because you understand your value. If everyone could be that way, I think more people could be vulnerable.
I think we need value one-on-one in elementary school, in middle school, in high school, in college. Like, we need to be teaching value everywhere we go. If we don't have that foundation of our value first, then the world will always be able to tear us down. Always be able to tear us down.
We need the help. Like 24/7. You was smart, you was kind, you was special. We know that every day to build value up. So no one can just tear it down at any time.
That's right. And that comes with that generational PTSD that we experience regularly. You know, what value are we teaching our children at early ages? What value are we teaching in our villages? Because it's not just the parents, right? It's the village too that teaches them. So yes, I agree.
Okay. Now your last one, lift others while you climb. Do you mind telling the story that you came from to come up with this last part, lifting others while you climb? How did you come up with this last?
Oh man. Yes. So this was actually part of the better parts of my sex worker career. Was at the strip club. So there was a beautiful, gorgeous, and what's amazing is that I'm still friends with this young lady. Many years later, I'm still friends with her. She actually just came to my birthday party this summer, which was awesome. But there was this beautiful stripper in the club. Her name was Delicious, right? Her name, they really did call her Delicious. It's so funny. She, everybody thought she was gorgeous. That she was amazing. And I just really didn't think that I was up to par with her. And one of the reasons I really didn't think I was up to par is because I couldn't dance. I still can't dance, to this day. A lot of people are like, how the hell are you a stripper in a strip club, but you can't dance, right? So I was always doing this, right? So I did a lot of VIPs because you couldn't really tell that somebody can't dance when you in VIP, right? You could just, you can grind on them and they'll be all right? But on the stage, you actually got to show some stuff, right? So I had this fear about getting on stage and then the whole world, seeing that I couldn't dance. So one thing that I did is that I would try to go early in the night so that they didn't have anything to compare me to know that I couldn't dance, right? And they still paying you money early in the night because they know they're gonna get kicked out. The bouncers, they see they ain't paying no money. They be like, man, you ain't put no dollars out. You gotta go. You gotta get up, right? So They were still putting out money early in the night. So I would try to always go on first, so they didn't have anything to compare to. So when I first went to this particular strip club, there was another young lady, not Diamond, but Delicious, that I was telling you guys about earlier, who would always get in front of me, that wanted to make sure that she got on first, right? And I was like, man, why is it that she, constantly is getting in front of me, right? But at the time, I was too afraid to really confront her about anything. So the first time she did it, I didn't say anything. I was just like, you know what, I'm just do VIP, I'll be good, whatever it is. The second night I went up and she jumped in front of me again. And I still, even the second night, I still didn't really do anything about it because I was like, I'm not trying to start any drama. The third time she came up, I had to say something, right? Because you still have to make sure that you don't let nobody push you around. Even though we are women, we ain't in jail or nothing like that, but you can't let people push you around. Otherwise, they're going to try to push you around all the time. So I knew that I was going to have to come out and actually do something in this particular case to show that, all right, you're not going to keep taking my spot up in here. We're going to have to go throw some hands or something, right? So I just knew we was going to have to fight. And she knew that, I was preparing for a fight. But she, instead of trying to come at me, she was like, you know what, I know, that you're trying to go on first, but she was like, I'm not really trying to go behind somebody that's really getting up there dancing. And it was like this click moment where it was like, word.
Both of us.
You can dance. It was just like, solidarity. I'm not by myself. Yeah, it was awesome. It was like, I feel good all of a sudden. Like, I'm not the only one that can't dance. Okay. And she taught me a few things in the game, like how to do tricks on stage to kind of distract people where they don't know you can't dance because you're doing all these tricks. Right. So we started to tag team up, but there was one time when we would go on stage together, and I had a tendency that it would start to become a crutch for me to go on stage with her, because I knew that if we was on stage, because both of us was thick and it was two women, that I wouldn't have to dance. But she knew how to work the pole a lot better than I did. So she climbed on the pole in one of these instances, and she told me to come up there. And I'm like, bitch, in my head, like, I can't get on this damn pole. What the hell are you talking about? Because I still wasn't used to being able to hold myself up. Like I didn't have the arm strength to pull myself up this pole, right? But we was already in front of everybody. So I had to figure out how to get up this pole. So I'm like, man, I have to make something happen.
All eyes on you. You gotta do something.
I gotta do something. Right? I'm trying to climb up the pole. And I'm trying to climb up, and I get halfway up there. And at first I'm like really, really excited that I'm like on this pole. And I'm like, okay, I'm halfway up this pole, right? And what I didn't realize is that it was my boots that's like allowed me to push myself up a little bit the first time, right? But when you're not on the floor, you don't have anything to brace yourself on this floor with, right?
Right.
So once I got halfway up the pole, I couldn't get up the rest of the pole. And she up there and I'm down here and I'm like, oh shit. what I'm about to do. But the worst part was that I started slipping down the pole because I couldn't just stay in that one place.
Right.
And that was the most embarrassing thing, right? So then I'm cussing her out in my head because I'm like, I knew I couldn't trust her. I knew that this was going to happen. I should have never did what she said. She set me up. I can't stand this bitch. That was what I was saying in my head, right? And I don't know if you can curse on your podcast.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
You know, so she saw that I was struggling at the time. And what she ended up doing is reaching down, and she pulled me up the pole, and then she went down and she did a split. Like, she was one of them girls that did hard splits, like, bam, like hard splits, like where people be like, oh, you know. So she did a hard split.
Think about it. Oh.
I've always thought that it hurt. They say it don't hurt. Maybe it's all the cushion in the back, right? But they say it don't hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I still can't do it. That's not my expertise. You know, she did a hard split on the floor and pulled me up, and then everybody just kind of thought it was a part of the show, right? And I was so grateful to her because the teamwork that she taught me, and the ability to just trust your connection, trust your process, and then trust your sisters, right? Because a lot of people, like I said, people always feel like Black women in particular can't get along. Right, but to be able to trust your sisters, even when you feel like the world is coming down, like you sliding down into a pit, you know, I learned how to trust again, you know, even when I thought that I couldn't trust her. And I learned that we always have to lift while we climb. So now I make it a point that everything I'm doing, I'm looking back to see who I can bring up. Who can I bring up? Who can I help while I'm doing this? Who can I, you know, carry up this pole with me while I'm making this happen? So I think it's so important that everywhere we're going, right, to make sure that we're lifting while we're climbing.
Yeah, instead of the other things, pushing down while you're climbing. That's the other thing we try to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you say is the biggest lesson you've learned? I want to say, like, okay, take yourself now. If you were to talk to yourself at 16 years old, what advice would you give yourself to help you grow along to the point where you're at now? What is the biggest lessons you would tell your 16-year-old self?
The biggest lesson that I would tell my 16-year-old self. You know, that's really hard because, you know, everything that happened in divine order. And I take everything in life as a lesson or a blessing. Right. You know, I do. So because I was in such a controversial industry, I was pregnant at least 10 times, you know, before I was 30 years old, you know, and I had probably over 10 children that I was not able to keep before I was 20. So first of all, I would, you know, educate myself a little bit more on contraceptives, but I was so afraid at the time that I was still challenging my value issues, feeling that if I asked clients to use condoms or anything like that, I would be less valuable. Yeah. So I took my chances. So I would talk to myself about contraceptives, but one thing that I would say that the biggest defining factor in my life has been to reframe anything that I'm going through as a lesson or a blessing, to be able to take everything as a positive and knowing that everything is working for me and not to me. Once I started seeing things differently in my life, no matter how horrible they were, my life started to change. Honestly, like it was almost like as soon as I changed my mind, the world changed with it. And that was the most powerful thing that happened in my life. So I wish if I could tell my 16-year-old self or my 12-year-old self anything, I would teach myself to be able to reframe my experiences a lot earlier.
Okay. Most of those things, and I include myself and probably a lot of people's lives, if we want to go back and tell our younger selves what we could do differently, it really wouldn't matter, because some things you have to go through certain traumatizing experiences to understand why things mean the way they do. Just understand why lessons matter. You might have didn't understand what value was if you just told yourself that instead of going through what you had to go through. 12-year-olds and 15 years old and 25 years old, you might not even listen. You might have to go through those things to finally understand. There's a lot of people that just don't get it until they're 40 or 50, and sometimes they never get it. No matter how many, they've had other people try to tell them the same thing. Sometimes you have to go through trauma to see that there's something positive on the other side. So
that's absolutely right.
You try not to have regrets, and what you said is very, very intriguing, is you don't have any mistakes. You try to just have lessons learned. If it's only a mistake, if you don't learn from it, if you just say, okay, this is who I am, I can't do anything about it, I can't change because I'm a fuck up, I'm a mess up, then it's a mistake.
Yep. It's only a mistake when we give up. So being able to reframe is so important. It's so important. And I try to teach the things that I couldn't teach myself back then. I try to teach it to my children now. It's still a challenge because I'm still learning as well. But at least I know a little bit more than what I knew back then.
All right. This is something I want to ask you about. We've been through a lot of things in 2020, with the whole COVID thing. And I always tell people, COVID was a perfect storm for, unfortunately it had to happen, but a perfect storm for things to happen for Black Lives Matter. Because people had to stay home and see the constant newsreel about Black men or Black women being shot by police or being treated unjustly by police. And we saw a lot of marches, we saw riots. We heard a lot of senators, governors saying they were going to do things to change. We even heard the guy who owns Chick-fil-A making a change for Black lives, even shining the shoes of one of the people on stage. I don't know, did you see that?
I did not see that.
Hey, look that up later. The owner of Chick-fil-A offered to shine the shoes as some sort of repentance for how Black people were treated in the past. I don't understand the meaning behind that, but okay. It seems like it's the perfect time to get change to happen, whether it's, laws to change for how minorities are treated in this country. My question is, by 2021, by the end of 2021, how do you think the Black Lives Matter movement is going to end? And I ask that because I think next year we're going to have 3 huge trials. Hopefully, Breonna Taylor trial, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd. And they have the potential to be found guilty or not guilty and then turn this country into another tailspin. How do you think 2021 will end for Black Lives Matter, in your opinion?
That's a very interesting question because I always believe the saying they said, whether you believe it will or you believe it won't, you're right.
Right.
So the power of our belief is going to manifest in these cases. So initially I have to say that, I do believe that the Black Lives Matter movement will end, and it's not going to end. First of all, it's not going to end. I'm not going to say it's going to end anything. It's going to continue to go strong. In reference to those 3 cases, I think that the murderers of George Floyd are going to be held accountable, and they're going to go to prison. I think that the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery will be held accountable. I'm a little bit concerned about whether they will be held accountable to the degree that the world feels like they should be held accountable. But I'm going to speak into existence that they will. I'm going to speak that into existence that they will, because I do believe that they should be charged with first-degree murder.
Yeah. I
believe that George Floyd's murderers should be found guilty of first-degree murder as well. So I do think that they will be found guilty. I think they will get prison time. How much prison time, I'm not sure. Breonna Taylor's case was already was already tried. The grand jury indicated that that the officers wasn't responsible for Breonna Taylor's murder, which was completely wrong.
Right.
But I think that justice is going to show up in a different way than in the legal system with Breonna Taylor's murderers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always hearing new information about the Breonna Taylor murder, and I felt like maybe they were going to revisit that. Maybe not next year, but at a later date. But I'm also kind of worried too about all three of them. I'm kind of worried because in this country, the reason why, as I mentioned earlier, why they were paid attention so much was because everyone was staying home. Mm-hmm. There was no sports. There was nothing to do but stay home and watch the news. And now there's sports again. People are going back to work. And it's not like these are the first three murders that ever happened or even caught on camera. It's hundreds, thousands that have been caught on camera before, and nothing happened until this perfect storm happened. So I'm almost worried that we're going to get distracted by something else. And if they were found not guilty, next year or whatever year it happens, I'm worried that it's going to be like, well, okay, another couple of cops just got off again. Let's move forward with life. That's what I'm worried about.
I don't think that the world is ever going to go back to what we know it as, honestly. I think we're going to keep moving forward. Okay. There's always going to be new distractions, however. Yeah. But I don't think that it's going to be like we experienced before. I do think you're absolutely right. It was a perfect storm. And what's interesting is that I've been writing about a perfect storm, mm-hmm. and how storms are feared in most cases, but storms are what help us to grow. Mm-hmm. And that this COVID storm was what was necessary for the world to grow.
Right.
And we needed to clear out all of the negative energy that was going on so that we can grow and create new life. So there is I do think that the world has a tendency to get distracted, but I don't think I'm not going to say that I think that they're going to get the sentencing that I think they deserve, because ultimately that will be up to the judge in the particular case. But I do think that they will be found guilty in Ahmaud Arbery's case as well as George Floyd's case.
Let's hope so. Let's pray so. All right. So now we're going to hit the last part of the show, where I'm going to give you 5 words or names, and I want you to describe in a sentence or a paragraph how these words or names make you feel. Okay? Mm-hmm. All right. No wrong answer. All right. First word. Friends.
I wish that I learned earlier on in my life the value of friends. I grew up learning that, there are no friends. Don't trust anybody. The only people you can trust is your parents. And I learned that I couldn't even trust those. So it put me in a very lonely position later on, that there are no friends, so it wasn't until I became an adult that I actually started learning to value how to have authentic relationship with friends.
Okay. What about this word? Equality.
When I think about equality, I think that in itself, equality is a myth. I don't think that mentally any individual or any group will ever be seen as equal, but I don't think that's the goal either. I don't think that we're trying to be seen as equal. I don't think, a lot of times people say, well, men are trying to be seen as equal as women, or women trying to be seen as equal as men. We're not trying to be seen as equal. We're just trying to make sure that we have what we deserve. And I don't think, even when we're talking about race, gender, class, sexuality, orientation, whatever the case may be, we're all different. And I think it's important to embrace those differences and not necessarily to try to make everybody blend in to be the same or equal, but to embrace each other's differences and to be able to utilize those and flourish in those.
Okay. How about this word? Police brutality.
You know, so what's interesting, I feel like I'm giving like a whole narratives on all of these things.
It's good. Get it out.
So I just started hanging out with this cop that, and I normally don't do cops. You know,
NWA? All right.
like I normally don't do cops at all, but I recently started hanging out and spending a lot more time with the cop. It's very early in the process, and one of the things that that I've experienced while spending more time with them is that, you know, it's not necessarily cops that are doing the brutality, it's people that are doing the brutality, you know, and we need to be able to hold the people accountable and stop letting even the people hide behind blue or hide behind the term cops, because what happens is that it allows them to be anonymous, and it allows them to just say, you know, cops are doing this, you know, instead of saying this person is doing this and this person, this individual person needs to be held accountable. When individuals have the blanket of police anonymity and that blanket protection, then they can't be held accountable to the standards of the law or to the standards of justice. So I think that we need to start not just holding police brutality accountable, but holding those people accountable individually.
Okay. Good answer. Good answer. All right. The next word is love.
Everything. I love love. I love love, and love is everything. That's what I feel when I hear that word. Like everything that we're doing in life is either for love or fear. And if I have to choose one or the other, then I choose love.
Okay. Here's your final word or words. Really think hard on this now. The percolator.
The percolator. It's time for the percolator. So, my dad is, he calls himself the percolator. Like that's his nickname. It's the percolator. So I'm gonna have to show him this so that he hears his name. When I think my dad actually, he just had a heart attack recently, and he had a surgery, and during his surgery he had a TIA, which is like, you know, like a form, like somewhat of a form of a stroke. And so I've been literally with him in South Carolina for the last week during his recovery. And one thing about my dad is that, you know, my dad, he's 63 now, but he has the energy of like a 30-year-old. He has more energy than I do. So he, at every party that he goes to, anytime he's in a crowd, he's always the center of attention. He's always the one that makes everybody else happy. He's always the one that makes everybody else entertained. You know, he's making everybody else smile. So that's why they call him the percolator, because he gets up, like at my birthday party, he was like dancing on chairs and dancing on tables and like throwing his shirt and stuff like that. You know, he was the entertainer. He makes everybody else have a good time. So that's why they call him the percolator. But the thing about my dad is that my dad is also very sad. And he's experienced so much trauma in life that I think that he's brokenhearted. And I had that conversation with him also, as well as a cousin. You know, I think that he's brokenhearted, and I think his broken heart from the trauma that he's experienced in life is manifesting in his body through his heart condition and through the TIA that he had, because he's never healed from that trauma of his broken heart. And it's so interesting when you see somebody that always makes everybody else smile on the outside, but they're hurting and crying so much on the inside. And I think that that's the story of what a lot of us as people go through in this world, you know. So when I think of the percolator, I think of the person that's always making the rest of the world happy, because that's what my dad does. He's always trying to make the rest of the world happy, but it should be also a constant reminder that you have to make yourself happy first.
Oh, that's an awesome answer. I wasn't expecting that out of that. You do the percolator, by the way, by chance?
You know, I can't even remember what the percolator actually really looks like. You know, like I remember, you know, so I can't remember if it was like the butterfly or like
I think that's a mixture of that in there somewhere.
Yeah, like had the butterfly in it,
I
you
don't
know.
do it.
So I could do the butterfly. That was one of the dances I could do.
I'll do the electric slide myself.
I can do the electric slide too, the old one. Now these new variations they got coming up, like those a little more difficult, you know.
It's like different versions. All right. Well, maybe one day we'll get you with some video, YouTube doing percolator mixed up with the electric slide all together. See how that turns up. See if anything explodes.
I got you. I'm gonna call you out when I do it too. I'm gonna call you out when I do it.
We'll do a challenge, and then that'll go viral, and then everybody will do the percolator electric slide challenge. I see it going viral already. All right. I love that you came on the show, Madam Nselaa Ward. I didn't know whether when you came on the show whether I was going to bow, because the madam part at the very beginning, I was like, should I bow when I introduce her? You know, I'm sitting down in a chair, so it's going to make it hard, but I wasn't sure if I was just going to get on one knee. I was like, that's a very royal name to hear and say out loud. So forgive me for not bowing, you know.
Thank you. No, you don't have to bow. But you know that madam
you don't do that
my sex worker days is where madam came from. Now, you know, it's a little more regal because I embrace, you know, the Afropolitan lifestyle that I choose to experience in this portion of my life. But it came from my sex worker days.
Now you have turned that into value.
Yes.
You want to tell people where they can find you? Tell them some few new projects you may have coming up. You want to go ahead and announce some of those?
Sure. So I am the managing partner of Nselaa Associates, which is one of the largest business architect firms in the Southeast. So I help mid to small businesses to be able to expand their companies and go from hustle to enterprise. So we go in and we build the complete infrastructure of your company, regardless of what stage you're at. We go in and we do an audit to find where your leaky holes are, to find out where your systems lack, to find out where your pillars are, and then we recreate that whole infrastructure for you so that you can actually run an enterprise instead of just a hustle. The other thing that we do is that most of our clients are not just, you know, your average entrepreneurs. You know, I focus primarily, my specialty is attorneys, doctors, real estate agents, and financial advisors. However, we have people in our firm that do multiple things. So our clients are generally not just, you know, attorneys, but they want to be like the Johnny Cochran of law or the Susie Orman of financial advising. So in addition to building their infrastructure first, we also take all of our clients on an international tour on colleges and universities around the world, so that they can express the thought leadership in their careers. They become thought leaders. And then the third thing that we do is that we help the entrepreneurs to be able to build a digital stream of revenue so that if we have another situation like COVID, they always have income that's coming in. So even if they are a traditional brick and mortar, or if they're a service-based business where they have to touch their clients, they always have this digital stream of revenue that's coming in that's related to their business. So we always have opportunities for clients to be able to come in and work with us. They can find out more information on our website, www.ninavafirm.com, which is NINAVAFIRM.com. You can also reach me on social media at Nselaa Ward. My name is spelled differently. It's N like Nancy. You know, it's the first thing. The N is silent. So make sure that you put the N in there, NSELAA WARD. right? So you can find me on Instagram at Nselaa Ward. You can find me on Facebook, Nselaa Ward fan page, Twitter at Nselaa Ward. You can also text in to me. I have a text line that actually goes direct to my phone directly. It'll give you all my social media, everything, every way to contact me. It'll tell you my social media. It'll give you, I also was a spoken word artist before I was an attorney, so it'll give you my whole spoken word album. It'll give you a link to my TED Talk, my website. It gives you everything if you text the text line. So it's 404-410-0200, 404-410-0200. And I have all my info there.
So can they call this at any time? Is there a time like you shut it down after 8 p.m.?
They can text it at any time, any 24 hours a day, and it will send my contact information to them. Now, I'm not saying that I will personally respond at after the day, but it will send my contact information and say, hey, this is how you reach me on all avenues, right?
Nice. Okay. I hope everyone who has been listening to the show draws inspiration from your story and passes the inspiration on to someone else. Thank you again for coming on the show. Many blessings. This is the end of another Hostile Therapy podcast. We will see you on the next episode. Peace out. To see this and more of my content, go to my YouTube page at Hostile Therapy with Big Red. Click, like, and subscribe.